So I have to start off by admitting I'm very jealous of Justice's name because if my name was Justice, every time I walked into a room, I'm Justice. It's the coolest name. Justice is also from Kumasi, Ghana. He holds a Bachelor of Science in Geomatic Engineering from Ghana and a Master of Divinity from South Korea. He is a man of world travel. For his current endeavors, he taught mathematics at the high school level in Ghana. A devoted Pentecostal, as much as we've tried to bring him over, tradition, he has fought us and resisted. Justice is passionate about faith, education, and community building. He enjoys listening to music in his free time. One of his guiding quotes is from Herman Bavnik: "Grace restores nature." Welcome, Justice.
Thank you.
Oh, and I should say, well, it's right up there on the screen, but the title of his research is Science, Medical Science, and Spirituality in Ghanaian Communities.
Oh, you're the tech guy, are you? Everybody needs one. Robert's mine.
Or two. Good morning, everyone. Morning. I'm very delighted to be with you today, and I'm happy to share my study on the topic science, medical science, and spirituality in Ghanaian communities. Growing up in Ghana, I've witnessed a lot of situations, and I just want to share two peculiar situations that were very related to me. One from my mom and one from my dad. Along the line, my mom was diagnosed with asthma. So she was gradually responding to medical care. And there was one night, it was a heavy night. It was raining so hard that she couldn't attend the hospital. And she had asthmatic attack. So that was where she had to pray. She had no other option than to pray. Either you pray or you die. But that was very severe. And I think it was almost 20 years ago. So the only thing she could do was to cry to God and pray for healing. And according to my mom, when she slept, she realized something had been taken away from her chest. And for 20 years now, he has never experienced any form of asthmatic attack. One from my dad. My aunt finally had an issue, land issue, and for how to explain it, someone cursed my aunt. So unfortunately, he began to grow lean. He started losing weight, a lot of sicknesses and illness. So my dad was involved, so I know much about that situation. So what happened was that she wasn't responding to medical treatment, so they took her to Côte d'Ivoire, a neighboring country to Ghana. So they went to seek for traditional healing, that is spiritual attention. And fortunately, she was lucky and she's now healthy and safe as of now. And this thing took place 15 years ago. Before I came to Canada, my wife got pregnant. In the early stages of her pregnancy, she experienced bleeding. And it was a worry because I was planning to come to Canada. And if she loses this pregnancy, it would be something else, because you can't just leave your wife alone without any hope for the future. That is part of the Akan or Ghanaian tradition. So fortunately, we had to visit the hospital. And the medical doctor told us that we cannot escape. It is very possible she's going to lose the pregnancy. But the doctor advised us to respond to medical treatment. So she was supposed to take an injection one every week. And it was very expensive. So the doctor told us, even I can promise you that this injection will be safe. So we had to choose between the injection and anything else. But when I remember how she was struggling with the injection, it was too painful that she couldn't do anything. So we decided not to proceed with the injection. And the other option was to pray. And God being so good, she was able to move through the pregnancy without any issue. Now, this informed me when I wanted to make a decision on my thesis or area to do my research. Because I have personally experienced some sort of spirituality in medical health in Ghana, I was tempted to visit that area and explore. This study exploits the intersection of science, medical science and spirituality in African communities and how it influences health-seeking decisions. Now, I'll be taking you through the introduction, the problem statement, my research gap, aim and objectives, study area, results and discussions, conclusion, my recommendations, and finally the references. Now, to proceed, considering Ghana, before the colonial era, traditional medicine has been very dominant in Ghana. I know World Health Organization defines traditional medicine as any alternative that is based on belief, practices, that is either tangible or intangible. But for the concept of this presentation, I chose to separate traditional practices from faith because for the advent of charismatism in Ghana, charismatism is not something that has been part of our tradition. It was after the coming of the Europeans when Christianity was introduced, and then later in the 20th century, charismatism became very popular. So for the sake of my thesis, I will separate traditional medicine or traditional healing practices from faith-based practices. And this definition was also referenced by Kwame. Kwame also defined traditional medicine as consisting of herbal medicines and spiritual healing, and also community-based treatments in the year 2016 in his research. Now, after the coming of the Europeans, Western hospitals and clinics were introduced. But because of the history and the culture and the way of life of Ghanaians, still traditional healing practices was able to persist. It stood the test of Western medicine. And that research was done by Ukan in just last year, 2024. And finally, from this introduction, I come to realize how Ghana medical or health sector has expanded. And even as of now, the government has recognized traditional healing practices. And it is evidential in Ukan's research in the year 2024. I proceed to combination of various sectors of our medical care or health practices in Ghana. Ghana combines traditional. Yes, as of now, as I said earlier on, traditional is standing on its own, faith-based, focusing on Islam and Christianity, and also modern medical practices. Now, I use the term THP for traditional healing practices, and that's how Nyame et al. They call it in their thesis in 2021. And according to Nyame et al., he also classified all forms of practices, with the exception of medical practices, under traditional healing practices. Okay, so I continue to the terrain in Ghana. Many Ghanaians seek spiritual healing before or alongside medical treatment. Yes, it is very predominant, and my study is going to explore this ideology. Now, why do we need to understand this study? Why do I have to waste my time to make a research into this study?
When you come home with your baby.
Understanding this dynamics helps create inclusive healthcare policies and improves collaboration between hospitals, religious institutions, and traditional healers. I particularly needed to understand, to do it, because from my mother's side, how does it inform my mother's healthcare decisions in the future? How does it inform? Is she going to ascribe to modern medical practices based on what she has experienced? How does it inform my father's sister, that is my aunt's health decision? Is it going to improve her attendance for medical treatment, or she's still going to stick to traditional healing? And about my wife, for my wife, I realized that it particularly informed her decision making. Why? In which way? Because when I advised her to go for cesarean section, she said no. Why? Because she might have felt that medical science is not trustworthy. In which way? The medical doctor told us that even if she ascribed to the injection, she is not guaranteed that the pregnancy will be sustained. And because we said, if that is what has been said, then let's look for the other alternative. It could be traditional, it could be classified as spiritual, and for her, it worked. How is it going to inform her decision for medical choices? So Exploring varieties of ideas from post-colonial, pre-colonial, and current trend in Ghana, I realized that many individuals prioritize faith-based healing over medical treatment, causing delay in cases. And I also saw that reliance on spiritual healing leads to postponement of essential medical treatment. Misinformation about modern medicine contributes to distrust and skepticism, and limited collaboration between healthcare professionals and religious healers results in fragmented care. High medical costs and limited healthcare access push people toward traditional and faith-based healing. So we further move to explore these various sectors. Considering my study, I made a research into a lot of existing archives and papers. I realized that there was a gap in this field. And the gap was a lot of people were trying to explore the relationship between spirituality and medical science. For instance, Geomatic, his research he did in 2016 was exploring the relationship. And Pobi also wrote a paper with Swaz, and their focus was how does faith affect mental illness or mental health. So from the series of research or readings I did, I realized that while they were exploring the various roles and effects and the relationship between spirituality and faith, very few research focused on the intersection, how to integrate these two components. Because one thing I know about life is that when people begin to experience something, if somebody experiences something, it is difficult to reject that ideology. We have to find ways and means to integrate. So if people are really experiencing results from spiritual practices, therefore there should be the need for us to find how it could be integrated into our mainstream healthcare. The main aim of this research is to examine how Ghanaian communities can integrate medical science and spirituality for improved health outcomes. And with this, I'm going to consider certain objectives based on my research questions. I want to analyze medical science in faith contexts, and it answers the question, how does faith influence the acceptance and practice of medical science? I want to investigate successful cases of medical science and spiritual collaboration in Ghana health. And it's related to the question, what are some of the successful examples of collaboration between medical professionals and spiritual leaders? And finally, to examine the challenges of healthcare collaboration. And it's related to what are the key challenges in integrating medical science with spirituality in Ghanaian communities. Now, for my study area and materials, my study area is focused in Ghana particularly and on the Akan community. Ghana is made up of 16 administrative regions with about a population of 30 million from the last population census conducted by the Ghana Statistical Service in 2021. Ghana is about 30.8 million. And with the Akan occupying the majority of the regions. And that research was done by Akono and Binding in 2021. Now in Ghana, the population is predominantly Christians. That is accounting for 71.3%, followed by Muslims at 19.9%, while 8.8% adhere to other religions. Nevertheless, American statistics in 2021 also estimated Ghana population of Christians to be about 80%. 80%. And I think it's somehow closer to 71% of Christians for my personal research. Now, with the methodology, my method started with the selection of qualitative research design, because this research wanted to explore and wanted to identify from various people, from members in the community, from focus groups, to identify information to gather personal experiences and practices, and what people have also noticed from a group of people. And in this research, I identified particular participants. One on my left was interviews from community members, religious leaders, and healthcare workers. And I also focused on certain people who had experienced exposure, a lot of experience from multiple groups, not their personal experience, but from what they have observed from their leadership position. The data was collected through semi-structured guides. Because it is broad and exploring, my questions were structured in such a way that I could also explore other options from the interviewee. If they have anything they want to share, I made room for that. So I accepted all this information into my data. And it was conducted, because I'm here in Canada, it was virtual. A lot of them was conducted on phone and it was recorded. In order not for me to miss any of the information, I recorded them and I had to transcribe them in order to retrieve vital and common ideas. I employed thematic analysis. With this thematic analysis, I was looking for very prominent and common words. For instance, during my interview with one medical doctor, he said, in Ghana, a lot of people see hospital as an emergency center. And from what he said, there were common things I could identify from it, some sort of delayed medical treatments. So I had to pick that and code it, create a code for that. And from that same context, I could see that there is a sort of mistrust, because if people really trust the medical care, there will be no two ways about it when they have a problem with their health. So that was how I was able to pick up common themes. Also, from one of the community members, he told me that before he visits the hospital, he makes sure he either prays, visits a spiritual leader, and if that fails, he has no other option than to visit the hospital. And it's made me aware of the spirituality, how people see medical issues in the context of faith. So I played them, familiarized myself with the recordings, and I begin to locate common themes. The next thing I had to do was to assign code for that teams, assign code for them. And from the code I assigned, it could be seen over here that I assigned codes like trust, belief, acceptance, skepticism. For instance, if somebody says, me going to the hospital, no, I can't. So it's some sort of an issue with trust. It's the same sentence also has an issue with belief, because people are believed to do what they accept. And also in the same sentence, I could find an element of acceptance. And there is also an element of skepticism. There is a foreknowledge the person has, which has informed his decision in his choices. So that was how I was able to assign the codes. And finally, I was able to identify teams and sub-teams, because I had a target for my work. So I was able to form a team like community perception of medical science. And in this case, I had to relate certain familiar words with that. Because if I have something like a code like trust, belief, acceptance, and skepticism, it informs me of the community's perception of medical science. And that was how I was able to develop my data or my code for my research. And finally, I had to interpret the information I got. So this is an example of the sample questions for one religious leader. And I was trying to explore the background and the role in the community, because this person was designated as a focus person or a focus group. So I asked him briefly to identify himself and the role as a religious leader in the community. And because of our time, let me skip because this question is nice. So now, from the table over here, I had 4 main teams and 16 sub-teams based on the codes I identified. And from how I got them, I could also say that community perception of medical science is based on trust, belief, acceptance, and skepticism. For instance, there was one woman who told me that through the interview, she told me that there was a time her mother was admitted at the hospital and she was diagnosed with high blood sugar. So the treatment that was given to the mother was to regulate the blood sugar in the body, to give insulin, to activate to eliminate the level of sugar in the blood. But later they realized that the mother was not responding. So after she was rushed to a different health facility, they realized that the issue had gotten nothing to do with high blood sugar. It means that the community's perception of medical science, a lot of them is based on trust. They have seen a lot of instances because as science develops, as health sector evolves, they face challenges. Health sector face challenges on its own. And always they try to get better. But the problem is that the people still have those instances in their mind. For instance, I was trying to convince my wife, why try CS? And it looked as if, she didn't tell me directly, but it looked as if she had some mistrust in the cesarean process because she doesn't really trust our medical personnel. There is some sort of skepticism, some sort of beliefs behind that. And that informed me about the perception of medical science in Ghana. With a something like cultural influence on healthcare choice, there were things I realized that the tradition where people come from also influenced it. For instance, one person told me, in our family, if you have any problem with your health, what you have to do is to visit a herbalist. And I was trying to let the person go further. Do you know anything about medical science? He said, no. For medical science, it is for the Westerners. So I realized that the culture of some people also influence their choice. And spiritual interpretation of illness. These themes were very common in the interviews I granted. And one of them was the spiritual interpretation of illness. From biblical point of view, in the Old Testament, God normally releases and punishes the people of Israelites with illness. And he promises them that if you are able to obey my words, I will not bring these illnesses and diseases to you. This concept has informed a lot of Christians about the origin of illness. Not only Christians, Africans or Ghanaians are very spiritual. A lot of research indicate that the spirituality level in Ghana is very high. So it informs every sector, every practice, and every choice. And it also informs our health sector. So a lot of people believe that illness has spiritual source. From an interview, it was seen. When I was trying to have a conversation with one religious leader, he told me that, yes, from what he has seen, there are a lot of evidences that there are spiritual sources of illness. So I was trying to explore with his experience and knowledge. So when he told me that when people begin to explore or people begin to use prayers, incantations, people begin to use some sort of spiritual directions, it influences their healing process. Okay. I also spoke with one of the community members, and the person told me that there was a time his baby was struggling with rashes, and the baby was taken to the medical for medical attention, and the baby was not responding. So finally, he took the child to the pastor. The pastor prayed for the child, and after 1 or 2 days, the rashes just vanished. So she told me that nobody can convince her that diseases are not related spiritually. And that is why I said that when people begin to encounter certain things, we don't fight against what they have encountered. We don't fight against what they have experienced. But the best thing we can do is to integrate. We integrate their observations, we integrate their experience with what has been established. So my role in the research was trying to understand the medical science in the faith context. And I was able to identify all these things in my research. Because of time. Because of time, I will speak to you.
We've got 20 minutes. We still have 20 minutes.
So, I come to integration of scientific and spiritual healing. I was looking at collaborative efforts between systems. And from the interviews, I was able to identify or get some codes for that. People were talking about collaboration. I realized that people don't really reject medical science. but they feel that there should be collaboration approaches, systems, structures to help different departments to work together. People were talking about referrals. I remember there was a time a woman said the son had mental problem, and the son was admitted at a psychiatric. And a person told her about one spiritual leader who was very effective in his deliverance or healing ministry. So she decided to bring the child from the psychiatric hospital or care. And the child was taken to the prayer camp. And for some time, the baby got well. Sorry, the child got well. But she didn't reject the role of medical science in the treatment of the child. But she instead insisted that there should be collaborations, prayer, spiritual rituals, herbal medicine, medical attention. But then she suggested that the system is not accepting that, because when she told the psychiatric care that the child has been delivered through prayers, they said, no, this is not true. It might be that it was just for a while, it automatically went. There was nothing spiritual. So she was stressing so much on collaboration. And also, people were trying to suggest a complementary healing approaches because they felt that there should be combination. I identify common themes like combination. I think we should combine. I think there should be a different approach. I think faith and medicine should work together. And I identify that these various codes should be assigned to the sub-team, complementary healing. And I would also want to talk about the role of religious leaders in healthcare decisions. From my interviews, I realized that our religious leaders influenced our healthcare decisions. They really influence our healthcare decisions. I remember there was a time we had a pastor in our church, and he's a prophet because I belong to the Pentecostal. So while he was ministering to the church, she told one woman that the pregnancy, she has to undergo cesarean section because if she's not careful, she might lose the baby. And I realized a sort of education. The leader began to educate the people on the need for medical attention. The leader began to educate the people on the misconception of medical attention. I remember Dr. Kamel drew my attention to one point during my thesis. She told me that medical care is divine provision. God, through people, heal. At the same time, God heals through medical practitioners. And I think the role of our religious leaders is to educate the people to also understand that God made provisions for all these departments. And I saw these teams very dominating in my interviews. They were very dominating from the religious leaders and from community members. Now, there were also success stories of There were also success stories of there was also success stories of integration. Because a research conducted at Bekwai, there was a research conducted at Bekwai in 2024 by Eric. And that research focused on the role of prayer, spiritual practices in healing process. And the research revealed that about 84% of patients accepted that prayers and spiritual rituals play a major role in healing process. From the story that was given to me by the woman whose son suffered from rashes, the woman said that she can't tell if the prayer really worked, but she believed that there was a combination of medical attention and faith. So this informed me that there are successful stories of integration, that if both faith or spiritual rituals and medical attention is harmonized and integrated, there are a lot of results, or it will inform our health outcomes. And it was manifested from the interviews I granted with people. And okay, I would also want to talk about how I got to understand the challenges to the healthcare collaboration. I realized a common theme over there: disrespect, disrespect, disrespect. Because from the conversation I had with the people, for instance, one nurse told me that you can tell me that. I remember she told me, you can tell me that most spiritual leaders are not educated. They have no idea about science, and they just doing anything, and they think they are contributing to the healing process. And I realized I sensed a sense of disrespect, not from only the nurse, from the community or the participants. They were all saying disrespect. If somebody requests for prayer or spiritual ritual from a chaplain, a pastor, or a spiritual leader, most times people are not allowed. Most times people are complaining about that. That's why I began to identify the challenges to our healthcare collaboration. Also, in some way, there are some sort of misinformation and skepticism. Some people have rumors, misconceptions, fears, costs. People think that medical health is very expensive. People think that people build hospitals, or the government is using the hospital to explore financial gain. People think that if you go to the hospital, they are going to take away every money or every financial strength you have from you. It's a bad conception from people. And I got this from the interview. There was one person who told me that I don't even have the transportation to the hospital. So for me, if I have any medical challenge, the only option is to take herbal remedy or visit my spiritual leader. That's what the person told me. So that informed me about the challenges people are facing, or the collaboration challenges that is faced by the collaboration into the healthcare. And one of them is contradictions, confusion, and dual treatment. There is a fear. Medical practitioners, they fear, because we have not done a lot of research into spiritual rituals. So we can't just accept them into our medical stream. We can't just accept them. So if you take this, don't take that. If you take this, don't take that. And people are so much confused. So if the person ascribes to herbal remedies or spiritual approach, the person feels that idea will be rejected by medical professionals. So the person decides not to visit medical hospital or for medical attention. And I saw that conflict between these two opinions is posing a big challenge to the collaboration. Now, I'll move on to my results and discussion. From the little that I gathered, the information, I realized that many Ghanaian communities integrate faith into their healthcare decision. Yes, from the research interviews, Edu Jemfi also conducted the research in 2016, and he saw the same thing. There is an integration. But the problem is, often seeking both medical treatment and spiritual intervention for healing due to spiritual interpretation of illness. And that problem is informed by their perception of illness. That harmony. They are not just exploring because they think that is a good way. No, because they believe that every disease, every sickness has a spiritual root. So if you force me to go to the hospital, I will have to take a spiritual decision or a step of faith. I also realized that successful cases of collaboration between doctors and spiritual healers were identified, highlighting the potential benefits of integrated healthcare practices. From series of research, people tried to integrate the approaches, and the researches were proving positive, similar to what I did. From my own research, I realized that people were confirming that when they integrate these two approaches, the result was very positive. And also, a major challenge in integrating spirituality with medical science is skepticism, affordability, misconception, and mistrust, which has been researched into by PEPRA. PEPRA was just identifying why people are not ascribing to medical care. And he realized that one of the problems from his research, he realized that one of the problems is affordability and mistrust. Even though I tried to do my best from a distance to get as much as information needed to explore for the topic, but I had some sort of limitations. I had limited generalization ability. Now, my thesis focused on the Akan community, and the participants were probably 16. I think that if the research had been expanded across, because Akan covers about six to seven regions in Ghana, focusing on just one region for Akan, I was just limited. Maybe other regions will have different influence. Maybe other regions will have different strategies on how they respond to both faith and medical care. Also, I lacked a qualitative data because of where I was using I couldn't get quantitative. Quantitative data, sorry about that. And I have limited longitudinal perspective. Now, the research, the positive collaboration I had was for just a very few moments. People are saying this, people are saying that. But I think this should have been conducted over a period of 10 years to see the integration, the results of the integration. Is it really positive? Within a period of 10 years, was there any changes? Am I still positive to say after 10 years that those integration stories were very positive? My research was just limited to very few periods. For instance, the woman who spoke about the rashes, I think it was just 6 or 7 months ago. And such testimonies or stories cannot be used for my research. I have to take a long period of time. If there should be any further research, it should be conducted over a long period of time to review the true effects and influence of these things. And for me to conclude on my presentation, I would say that many Ghanaians seek both medical and spiritual healing for various reasons. And secondly, partnership shows benefits of integration. And also skepticism, cost, and mistrust hinder acceptance. Now, I will also recommend that since many Ghanaians seek both medical and spiritual healing, healthcare providers should acknowledge spiritual beliefs and incorporate culturally sensitive approaches to patient care. To strengthen partnership, structured guidance, and training programs should be developed to facilitate effective collaboration between medical professionals and spiritual healers. And there should be an address to skepticism and misconceptions through public health campaigns, affordable healthcare options, and policies that promote trust in integrated healthcare practices. Thank you.
Loads of time. Thank you very much. And I have to say that's the most animated I've seen Justice. The whole time.
The worry about the baby is gone.
Big day in many ways.
I like it. Strong preacher vibes today. If you don't mind upping the share screen so we can see everybody. Same rules as last time. If you're in the room, put up your hand. If you're online, use the hand raise feature or just wave at us. Michelle again is first out of the gate. So go for it.
So you distinguish, like you said, the other person that you were using the research from didn't distinguish between faith, like prayer, and, for example, herbal medicine. But you wanted to distinguish between them. But what you didn't do here was to at least if you did, I missed it. You didn't identify whether or not there were areas of mistrust between someone who, for example, used herbal medicine and someone who used just prayer. So you could say a little bit about that?
So my research focused entirely on how spirituality influenced medical decisions. That was the focus. Because from the little research I did, even though I didn't move further to that step, but my research focused on how spirituality, how their faith, how our tradition influences our healthcare decisions. Because from my stand, I was assuming that from the series of research I made, people were already informed of their spirituality. And they believe that it is a matter of faith. So people don't really test their faith in the aspect of spirituality. because there are a lot of researchers that is trying to discredit spirituality without evidence. But then people still hold to the fact that spiritual things are not visible. So whether they see or they don't see, they believe it. So my focus was to see how such informations, ideas, philosophies, and phenomena influenced their healthcare decision.
So do you think then, okay, so that you had mentioned how Carmel said that that medical science is also like a way in which God uses sort of thing. So do you think that it might be easier to get people to sort of get past their distrust if they already not only use their faith and prayer, but if maybe they're open to the idea of herbal medicine? Do you think that might be a sort of step towards also, say, well, herbal medicine is a way that God uses, and then also here this other medicine is medical science is also. So do you see like a method of integration by using herbal medicine as a step towards more trust towards medical science?
Okay, so now with this, I have to go back to a little history on herbal medicine in Ghana. Our from the Ghanaian communities, our perception of herbal medicine is more of spiritual. It's more of spiritual. Now, from history, our communities were guided by leaders, spiritual leaders. And such leaders, before the coming of modern medicine and science, such leaders, their responsibility or role was to protect the community. And they did this through rituals to seek for protection, rituals to fight for any sort of attack that comes against the people. Because today we understand the foundation of pandemics and epidemic. But before, there was nothing like that. So people perceived such things like sex-related diseases, early childhood diseases. People attributed them to be spiritual. And there were leaders who were assigned. And for these things to be resolved, there were leaders who were thought to have been chosen by our forefathers. And they have spiritual inspiration. That's the word, spiritual inspiration. So the history of our herbal medicine begins from there. So I believe that if I am sick and I visit a herbal medicine, the person is not just giving me the herb because it has scientific background, but the person has a prior information that is a divine direction. The person has received some sort of mystical direction that use this and this, you'll be cured. That's the secret behind herbal medicine in Africa. But this time, when it goes through medical science, research has also proven that it is facing some sort of rejection because people feel that it has been adulterated with chemicals. Because it has been, this time, it is not more of spiritual, it has become fully medical. So there is some sort of ideology behind herbal medicine, herbal remedies, because that's how they used to work. For instance, when my mom was young, whenever she is sick, okay, let me bring this. I had a friend, and they were twins. When she was born, she was very lean, and she had a lot of medical implications. So she was taken to the herbalist, and this herbalist was not anybody who deals with scientific knowledge on herbs. No, the person has divine inspirations. He receives inspiration that use this herb, do this, do that. So according to the lady, she told me that a concoction was prepared using some herbs, and she was dug into the concoction for 3 times, and that was the end of that challenges. So that is how our people are informed about herbal approach. Though there are some scientific backgrounds that prove some elements that fight against diseases in our herbs, but the basic perception of our people on herbal medicine is about spirituality. I remember before I traveled to South Korea, just an example. Before I traveled to South Korea, I went to a herbal shop to buy medicine because I was having waist problem. When I went to the woman, she began to tell me mystically what has really happened. And the drug she gave me was not medically approved drug. Even though it was herbal, even though it was prepared, but she gave me the drug based on the inspiration she received. I've been told this, that, use this and that. So there's some sort of belief of spirituality in our herbal medicine. So before you can eventually inform that info or bring that information into the acceptance of medical science, the spirituality draws a gap between them. If it is herbal, we believe it is spiritual. There was one medical practitioner in Ghana, she died last 2 years. She founded one of the biggest traditional hospital, let me call it hospital. And she was interviewed. How did he get this inspiration? She said she suffered, she nearly died at the hospital. There was no intervention. So the mom brought her out one day and she was visited by a mad person came to her and stretched her hands on her and she began to recover. Later, that mad person appeared to the dream and gave her inspirations about how to use herbs to cure diseases. And eventually, she established a medical facility, a herb facility, and she was successful. Unfortunately, she died 2 years ago. So this is how our people are informed about herbs. So herb in our country, that's why I wanted to distinguish between traditional medicine and spiritual for the sake of my research. Because when people talk about herb, there should be some sort of divine inspiration about herb. And that brings the trust. Because a spirit, a prophet says this, a herbalist says this, a spiritual leader says this. So I believe in that divine inspiration. If it's something from science, medicine, no, people don't want to trust.
To add something to what is just sharing, even though the leaf they use to heal certain things can be at a particular place, if you don't have that inspiration and you go and pluck it, it won't work. It has to come from somebody that has been inspired, or who has been inspired by, should I say, the deity, the gods, the ancestors. Whatever they heard, whatever inspiration they got, they get the leaf and it will work on you. Not any ordinary person can have access, even though you can go to the forest, all right. But the leaf that is mostly used to cure disease and all that, it must come from somebody we believe might have been inspired by the ancestors to do that. And just as he's saying, I think he gave statistics that Christians are 71 and Muslims, and the 8.8% are people that stay at the extreme end, mostly, who still believe in this strongly. They really do believe in this strongly. First, when somebody is born with as a sickle cell, I don't know if you are aware, sickle cell, they think it's a child from the water. They go and dispose the person in the river body. But human rights and all of that is challenging some of these issues. And I think things are just evolving.
Karika online.
Oh my gosh, Justice. Oh, my video is not that great. I really, really liked your presentation and I could relate to some of it because even in Sri Lanka, we do have a lot of traditional medicine, like you said, and a lot of the people who practice it, I mean, the people who go to them do believe that they have a spiritual power. Like, they're not obviously related to any, like, I've never heard of any person who practices like this medication who've been Christians because they are so deeply rooted with the Buddhist history in Sri Lanka. But they do have so much of spirituality because I've heard of like stories where like people have broken bones and then they'll rub oil and they get healed. So I found your presentation so interesting and it was really good. Thank you.
Again, thank you, and thank you for your very scientific approach to Bachelor of Theology. I haven't seen such an approach. That's really good. A couple of reflections. One, as someone who's worked sort of as a chaplain over the years,
it's almost like we have the opposite problem. The people here go to Western medicine, traditional medicine. When all else fails, then they call the chaplain. I said, and I've even had, but the importance of trust in the relationship between the spiritual health caregiver and the physician and nurses is so important, because I know that when doctors sort of trust you, then they would call me in, like when they were giving news to patients, or patients are trying to make decisions about healthcare. But if they didn't trust you, then they wouldn't let you in. And I've had, I'm sure the clergy here probably too, like, I've had experiences where you've been in the family room with people, and the doctors come out and said, I've done what I can. It's in her hands now. Like she's the only one who can help you now. And I'm like, gee, thanks. No pressure. But you know what I mean? But a lot had to do with the faith of the medical professional, right? I've had experiences myself of going to doctors who had very visible Bible on their desk, and signs of the prayer tools in their offices, and they would even say, like, would you like me to pray with you, like, before your surgery? So a lot has, like, the people, the religious leaders have to trust the physicians, and the physicians have to learn to trust the religious leaders, and that's not easy. And you worked in
Well,
that.
having worked in
Yeah.
healthcare system for so many years,
Yeah.
as a social worker and dealing with that, I mean, one of the issues is that we have a very narrow definition of what healing is in
Yes.
our system. We think healing, we equate that with physical repair.
Yes.
And even when we're doing in our assessments would always be biopsychosocial,
Yeah.
never spiritual. And for a time, you couldn't even ask what someone's religious denomination was to get a sense of their history. But I couldn't function that. I mean, that had to be part of the relationship you develop with people, because at the end of the day, a cure is just a time-specific
Yes, right.
result, because healing, you can't equate healing with cure, and that's the where they're running constant disassociation between anything that's non-traditional to traditional. And it was really counterproductive, because a lot of patients would not talk freely about what they were using on the side, because they didn't want to disappoint their doctor, and doctors consequently didn't know what the other person was using. That might interfere with the chemicals they were taking. So it was really counterproductive, and so much work needs to be done in that area.
Yeah.
In this practice.
You've highlighted a big hole in
Yes.
our here.
Elaine and then John.
I just wanted to say that your presentation was fascinating. Your research is amazing. It's so interesting. And your approach to it was like brilliant. I'm so glad that I came to hear this presentation today. It was like something really warm about it all, even though you're talking about the kind of mistrust and stuff. But it's a great, I hope it's followed up on, like, in your communities and in other communities as well. It was brilliant. And so I wanted to tell you about my one little personal experience. I was in the mountains in Oaxaca, Mexico one time, and I got sick. And the person who was like preparing our meals said to me, well, we'll go and get so-and-so. And so they got him, and he talked to me for a bit, and then he went and brought in some stuff and gave it to somebody in the kitchen and said, boil it off. And I got better. But what I just realized with listening to you is that the person who I spoke to probably knew what herbs did what, but that was not their role in the community. So they had this other spiritual person who came, and so that's probably what I experienced that worked so completely wonderfully for me. So yeah, anyway, thanks so much for that. It was lovely.
I have a personal experience, and I think it was 2008. I could have the year wrong, but in the pastoral care, which we had a doctor on our pastoral care in Marystown, somebody brought a study from New England Study of Medicine, and it was on heart attack people in the United States, and they compared the healing time of those who had people come in and pray with them and those who didn't, and it was 8.3 days quicker for those who had prayers. And I don't know what year it was. I don't know what the name of the study was, but that doctor shared it with other doctors. And the attitude in Marystown changed a bit. Now, it didn't last forever, but it's just proved there. And as per medical people, I had one doctor who every time I went in there, she said, before you leave, have prayer with me. And she had religious icons on her wall. Now, I don't know whether that would be allowed in the medical system today or not, but she very much, and she told me her father was a clergyman in Egypt. Now, what faith he was, I don't know, but she wanted prayers. And she very much appreciated them. And she would remind me to pray for her when I wasn't in the office.
Any final questions? Okay, we gotta get Justice into a PhD program now. So
And we need a picture of the baby.
picture the baby first, then we're gonna get you into PhD program. Expand this research. Thank you so much, Justin.
Thank you.
Wonderful.